Talk to you in a few. Thank you, DJ. As Rockford prepares for the possibility of future data center proposals, city leaders don't agree on how to regulate them yet. Madeline Korzanuski explains why a request for a temporary moratorium was not up for discussion during Monday's council committee meetings.
If there's no motion and second.
Like tonight, where there was no second or conversation about this moratorium item, it kind of reflects a little bit of the consistency that we've seen with this item being proposed, where there was no conversation with colleagues over the last maybe month or two with the individual or alderman who proposed this. So
a request to pause future data center proposal stalls during Monday's Rockford Codes and Regulations Committee meeting. The request came as some city leaders debate how future data centers should be regulated.
I think there's a lot of questions still to be answered despite all of the public debate that has been going on over the last several weeks.
Alderperson Mark Bonney says a temporary moratorium would give the city more time to answer those questions before considering future proposals. He also says confusion over recent discussions has left some residents unsure what's actually being considered.
I could not agree more that there should be regulations around data center development, but I'm confident that the proposal that I put forth 90 days ago and that was revised by our legal department is the next step forward. We've already been in motion, no need to go backwards.
Alderperson Tamir Bell says he agrees stronger regulations are needed, but believes the city should build on work already underway. He says his proposal would establish safeguards for future data centers, including standards for water and energy use, noise, and public oversight before projects move forward.
One of the biggest challenges we have right now is our elected leaders just coming together to have tough discussions and come to an agreement on some of the hot topics in our community.
In Rockford, I'm Madeline Korzanuski.
Alderperson Tamir Bell says conversations on his data center regulations proposal are expected to start next Monday. Also approved by the Finance and Personnel Committee tonight, the acceptance of a $100,000 grant. Some of the money will be used toward the city's 2027 annual subscription renewal fees for flock safety license plate cameras. The money comes from the Office of the Attorney General for the State of Illinois fiscal year 2027 Organized Retail Crime Grant. Both matters will now head to a full city council.
I also want to make sure that everybody understands this is not a new contract that we all of a sudden came through forward with the flock cameras, and it's not me trying to say that I support 100% this or that, but this has already been established.
I know there's been controversy on both sides of the issue. I try to support our police department and the tools that they need to do a good job to protect the citizens of the city of Rockford. That's what their job is. And unless they prove that they're misusing that tool, then I think we ought to move forward and let that happen.
The man convicted of killing the University of Idaho students in 2022 wants to take back his guilty plea and go to trial. According to comments Brian Koberger made to the New York Times during an interview from prison, he filed a post-conviction release form in Idaho courts Monday. Koberger blamed his plea on false promises and wrong information. He was convicted last year after he pled guilty in open court and admitted to the murders and was sentenced to life without parole. President Trump asked the Supreme Court to allow his executive order curbing mail-in voting to move forward. The president is asking the High Court to make the decision months before the midterm election in November. 23 Democratic-led states sued to stop the executive order, arguing the Constitution leaves it up to the states to run their elections, not the White House. The federal district court blocked the executive order for this year's election in the states that sued, and a federal appeals court upheld that decision over the weekend. Well, Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell provides another health update Monday. It comes 6 weeks after the 84-year-old suffered a fall that took him away from his congressional business. As Washington correspondent Stephen Goen reports today, the senator's doctors says he is still in recovery.
2 weeks ago, we got our first update from Senator McConnell after he'd been virtually silent for a month. Now we're learning a little more.